Hi, it's Dwyer. It is Sunday, June 19th, 2022. Dwyercrime.blog, a free site. Always1776.com, a free site. Let's dive a little bit deeper into the Michael Peterson case. As some of you might know, I made an earlier video in 2017. The link will be in the description section of this video, where we talk at length about the forensics of the case and why I feel Michael Peterson killed his wife Kathleen. But let's look at it from a different angle here. Let's actually come up with a theory of what happens. A theory of what happened that fits the evidence. But first, remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, as I said earlier, the forensics are discussed at length in the video, for which I've placed a link in the comment section to this video. Let me just point out a few things. First, I thought David Rudolph, the defense counsel, did about as good a job as a defense counsel could do in this case. I thought he was magnificent, especially given that he had a client who was passive-aggressive, who was not upfront in disclosing the truth to him. Right? If Netflix's The Staircase is to be believed, Rudolph finds out after the prosecution finds out about the woman who died in Germany, Elizabeth Ratliff. His own client, Michael Peterson, does not tell him. Right? So I thought he did an excellent job. But I do believe there is one aspect of this case that confused all of us. Right? We'll talk about it in this video. It's the blood evidence. At the trial, it was assumed, I believe incorrectly, that the blood was a byproduct of the murder. Right? The blood was a byproduct of the injuries suffered by Kathleen Peterson. Right? In this video, I'm going to make an argument, and I want people to understand this is a very adult video. It's not for kids. I also want everyone to understand that this is all opinion, right? Based on the evidence. But I want people to make a leap here and to openly speculate with me about whether the blood was actually part of the cover-up. Whether the blood was actually a distraction. Let's talk about it. Michael Peterson. Who is he? In my opinion, this former captain in the armed services is not in love with his wife. Rather, he is in love with his life. Right? The couple lives in Durham, North Carolina. I believe that Peterson loves being the patriarch of a Southern family in a big house with a pool and a lot of close friends. He isn't in love with his wife, but he loves having a wife who is social, who's an executive, who likes having company over, who likes attending parties with him. Peterson wants to be part of the city council. He wants to have power and influence in the community. So he runs for office. He's so desperate to get this power and influence in the community that he overstates his military resume. Right? He claims to have things, awards, combat injuries that he did not have. Now, the couple bought the house in 1992 for $600,000. The house now, by 2001, has some equity in it, right? You can take a guess at the amount of equity that it has. Let's say it has at least a couple $100,000 in equity. The house apparently sold, by the way, after the fact in roughly 2020 for $1.9 million. Now, the house, while it's big, while it's one that Michael Peterson loves, right? He loves the house, not the woman. The house has bats in the attic, and it has termites. The couple is having a problem paying bills. Understand, according to reports, they have around $143,000 in credit card debt. Kathleen feels that the house is a financial drain at this point. She wants to move. Now, there is some urgency going on with the couple. Kathleen, a Nortel executive, fears that she is about to be laid off, possibly as soon as her next day at work. In other words, there's been economic uncertainty at Nortel for some time. Other people have gotten laid off at Nortel. Kathleen and Michael Peterson are talking about the fact that they're going to have to cut back. Peterson's sons have actually been living in part off of the couple financially. Right? Peterson actually reaches out to third parties for help financially supporting his sons. So, curiously, the day before Kathleen Peterson dies, Michael Peterson deletes more than 200 files. This is unusual, folks. 200 files from his computer. Right? Just understand, a couple days or so after Kathleen dies, Michael Peterson deletes another 300 plus files from his computer. But let's focus on just the files he deletes before her death. Just understand that coincides with the time period in which she's discussing their financial uncertainty, where they're discussing the fact that they're going to have to cut back. So, just understand that the world would change if Kathleen goes to work the next day and gets laid off. Then a lot of these private conversations would become public, wouldn't they? So there's, let's say, a turning point that coincides right around the time when Kathleen dies. So, let's talk about some of the theories about the death. Now, I'm troubled by the holes in the theories. The blowpoke theory. The idea that Kathleen is killed by Michael Peterson, who is swinging a blowpoke at her head. Right, folks? The blood cast off doesn't match. Understand, there is no blood on the ceiling of the stairwell. If a blowpoke is used, you would expect to see, as Peterson reaches back, right? There's 7 lacerations on the back of her head. As Peterson reaches back, you would expect to see blood in places where there is no blood. Also, and perhaps more importantly, Kathleen Peterson's skull is not fractured. If a blowpoke is used, as they suggest on Netflix's Staircase show, her skull would have to be fractured at least once, as her husband reaches back and then comes forward to hit her in the head with a blowpoke that has a sharp object on it. Right? Kathleen's skull is not fractured. So, understand, some of the theories put forth at trial, I feel, were way off base. So let's talk about what I think actually happened. Understand, it's very different than what was discussed at trial. Now, we know from trial that Kathleen's thyroid neck cartilage is fractured. That's very important. Now, it's possible it could have been fractured by a fall down a flight of stairs. But it's also possible that it could have been fractured by her being strangled. I believe Michael Peterson strangled her to death. I don't believe the strangulation involved any blood whatsoever. Let's pivot here. According to the official story, it's December 9th. Outside, we know the weather was about 50 degrees. Michael Peterson wants you to believe that he was wearing a t-shirt and shorts outside early in the morning for a long period of time. Right? He doesn't go in the house to get a jacket. He doesn't go in the house to get on a pair of pants. No, he is wearing a t-shirt and jeans. At least that's what he claims when the police officers come to see him. Now, as discussed in the earlier video, again, the link is in the comment section. That's a very important video to watch. I believe the scene is clearly staged. I believe the 911 call is fictitious, right? The purpose of the 911 call is to have Michael Peterson tell the dispatcher that his wife's still breathing. We know from some of her blood analytics that that wasn't the case. She had been dead for some time. We also know that there's a bottle with 2 glasses in the kitchen, but that her fingerprints are not on either glass. In other words, Peterson put the bottle there, right? The prosecution believes they didn't even drink from that bottle, that the bottle's placed there, that Peterson drains the bottle in the sink, but has it there so when the cops walk in, they think, oh, this woman who's in the stairwell, the bloody stairwell, has been drinking. that may have contributed to her injuries. Right? I believe the scene is staged. I believe this is premeditated. I believe at least an hour passes between when she dies and when the police arrive at the house. Understand, too, that Peterson's sneaker print is on his wife's clothes. That by itself discredits his story. But when the cops arrive, he's barefoot. Right? We know he was wearing sneakers earlier, but he's been cleaning up to the point where he's barefoot when the police arrive. We also know that you have dried blood, and that on top of the dried blood was a fresher blood sample, that there was an effort to clean up at the crime scene. So what I believe happened is that Michael Peterson plans the blood, plans the use of the staircase as a distraction to cover up the murder. In other words, he kills his wife, strangles her. There's no blood anywhere. He has to come up with a distraction that's going to have the cops look away from him, that's going to have the cops think that this is an accident. What does he know could do that? The situation in Germany. The death at the bottom of the staircase of Elizabeth Ratliff, which of course was excessively bloody. Let me talk about DA Frida Black's closing argument, a portion of it, related to Elizabeth Ratliff. I'm going to read this. It'll take about a minute and a half. This is from DA Frida Black's closing argument. I should say ADA Frida Black's closing argument. Why did the state take up the time, trouble, effort of exhuming the body of Elizabeth Ratliff? You know, it began with Margaret Blair and Rosemary Calloway. When they first heard of how Kathleen was found, that she was deceased, they did contact Art Holland because something didn't add up. Again. And that was before they even knew all the rest of the details. Now, yesterday, Mr. Rudolph, defense counsel, made fun of the similarities between the two cases. He made fun of each one individually. You cannot take them individually. You have to compare the totality of the circumstances to the totality of the circumstances in this case. Both victims found at the bottom of the stairway. Large amount of blood present at both scenes. Both victims are female. Both victims in mid-40s. Both victims had a close personal relationship with the defendant. Both reported severe headaches before death. The time of day was similar. They both had social lives with Mr. Peterson. Peterson was the last known person to see both of them alive. No evidence of forced entry. No evidence of property taken. The defendant was the one that reported to authorities that the death was by accidental fall. Both died due to head wounds. Same number of scalp lacerations. Same general location of scalp lacerations. Both victims had defensive wounds. Both places blood spatter was high up on the wall. The defendant was in charge of their effects afterwards. He was in charge of each estate. He received money and goods after each death. There were no eyewitnesses to either death. No weapon was recovered after death. Now let me just ask the question and then I'll give an answer. What did Michael Peterson know about falls down staircases? I believe the answer is that they were bloody. I think he kills his wife by strangulation. Then I think he has a sharp object, right? Could be a pocket knife, could be a couple of pocket knives, could simply be some object that is sharp. He takes his wife, who's not bleeding, over to the stairwell. Then in his hand, with this sharp object, he starts cutting the back of her head. Look at diagrams of the back of her head. There's one cut off at the side that's much bigger than the others. I believe Michael Peterson lays his wife down in the stairwell, is moving her body around, leans over in a scene that has no blood whatsoever because she has been strangled to death. And I believe he cuts the back of her head so that the injuries look similar to Elizabeth Ratliff's, because that worked before. He got away with murder before, in my opinion. So here he cuts up the back of his wife's head and lays her down, rearranges the body. When you cut the head, there's a lot of blood up in people's heads. Head wounds bleed more than other wounds. As she's bleeding, he is moving the body around. At one point, he picks her back up. Blood's already on the floor. Blood gets on the soles of her feet. Right? He is there, might have, because he has the time, might have booties on, might have something on his feet that don't leave his footprints. What he doesn't have on at this point are his sneakers. I believe Michael Peterson creates the blood at the scene because he knows that worked last time. If there's no blood, then all he has is a strangled wife. Then the idea that she fell down the stairs without injuries is not credible. So he, with a sharp object, the kind that cuts skin because he's trying to create blood, but that would not fracture her skull. He's just there to create lacerations, right? Look how sharp in the photos of the back of the victim's head her wounds are. Right? So he muddies it up. This is a guy who's been in the armed forces. Right? He may have a couple of pocket knives. He may just have an old object with sharp edges. That's what he uses on the back of her head to give her 7 lacerations. Understand, her body doesn't show enough injuries for her to have fallen down any flight of stairs. In the Netflix show, they have her, right, just falling down the bottom of the stairs. When the paramedics get to her, understand, people who fall downstairs, sometimes their heads no longer align with their spinal columns. These falls are violent. Sometimes spinal columns get dislodged. Not here. Her head is perfectly aligned with her spinal column. Right? All the lacerations are on the back of her head. You don't have the bruising or the lacerations if there are sharp parts of the staircase. You don't have that anywhere else on her body. Why is it all in the back of her head? So then we get the fiction. The fiction is that she fell down. That if she called out for her husband, he wouldn't have heard, because he's conveniently out of the house in the back by the pool. Right? Understand too, the idea of her yelling for him is inconsistent with Henry Lee's novel idea that she's spitting up blood. Which one is it? Is she yelling for her husband who's in the back, or is she spitting up blood? That's why we have the excessive blood, right? The blood that's not consistent with a fall down the flight of stairs, just like her laceration wounds, which are localized, right? It's all in the back of the head. You would think she'd have several in the front, that she's falling down stairs and her head bounces from left to right or right to left. No, it's all in the back of her head. I would argue she's cut up in the back of her head. That the blood is deliberately created by Michael Peterson to distract authorities. Right? Understand, by the time all of this is taking place, more than 200 files have magically disappeared from his computer. And of course, his wife is fearing that when she goes to work later that morning, that she's going to be laid off. That they may not have a choice on the house. Right? She dies after the deletion of the documents, of the files. Who knows what was on them? Right? She dies, has the broken neck cartilage that's indicative of strangulation. And of course, bleeds out due to wounds in the back of her head that do not fracture her skull. From there, I believe there's an effort to clean up some of the blood by Michael Peterson. He realizes the blood is excessive. There's an effort to make it look like Kathleen was tipsy. The problem is they took a blood alcohol sample from her. It was 0.07. In other words, she was not legally intoxicated under North Carolina law. Right? We then find out that the couple was having financial problems. She was at risk of being laid off. At trial, Rudolph made the argument that the house had equity in it. Folks, the problem is that Kathleen has her own daughter, right? other people were to inherit the house or get a piece of the house. Right? Somehow Kathleen's first husband, Caitlin's father, is in the mix with claims on the estate. Right? So at the time Kathleen passes, just understand that she had more than $1 million worth of life insurance, in addition to her 401k. That would give Michael Peterson the chance to continue with the life that he loved in Durham, North Carolina, where he wanted to be on the city council, where he had already run for office. He would still be patriarch of a Southern family in a town he loved, in a big house with a pool. Now think about what would have happened had Kathleen lost her job. Had Kathleen said, hey, I want us to move. Understand, the couple may have been having problems. Right? There's an email from Michael Peterson that we know of to his wife shortly before she dies, where he talks about working on their marriage. Understand, too, that Kathleen left her first husband because he had been unfaithful to her. Right? There are indications here that Michael Peterson had been unfaithful to his wife. It's possible that the real possibility of Kathleen losing her job, as so many others had at Nortel, had her reconsidering her life, and of course the big house that they paid $600,000 for now had problems that would require money to repair it. Serious problems, termites, right? Serious problems that may have had her saying, hey, Michael, we need to move from here. Something Peterson did not want to do. You add it all up, and if you, like me, believe that Michael Peterson is a sociopath, you might conclude that his deletion of more than 200 files the day before his wife dies, the fact that they're having financial problems, the fact that his wife is the breadwinner and Peterson has no real income, the fact that his wife is helping to financially support his kids and might not be able to do so should she lose her job. If you believe all of those things are interrelated, then there is a distinct possibility that he strangles his wife, then has to create the blood to distract police to make it look like a fall down the staircase. And then Peterson is surprised to learn that after years of cultivating this, I'm an author, I'm a Southern gentleman persona, the police actually suspect him of killing his wife. They didn't suspect him in the Germany murder, even though he was the last person to see Ratliff alive. I'm sure he was shocked. He thought he was smarter than everyone else when he staged this murder scene. So I encourage people to go back to my earlier video. Folks, the timeline on this is off. She doesn't fall down a flight of stairs. In my opinion, she's placed at the bottom of stairs when she's already dead. The defense can argue that her throat cartilage gets ruptured based on a fall down a flight of stairs. Where are the injuries to her body? Apart from the back of her head, that would suggest a violent fall down the flight of stairs. I don't think there's enough here. Understand, too, there's blood on the inside of Peterson's shorts, right? He's around his wife. He's moving his wife. I don't think we know with certainty what clothes he was wearing. His version of events where he's wearing a t-shirt and shorts in 50-degree weather when his wife goes in the house, and that he decides in the early morning hours to stay outside, just doesn't ring true to me. In any event, that's how I see it. I believe Peterson throws out what he was wearing before he contacts the cops. Right? He had to have acquired. And to me, this reeks of premeditation. Just like the deletion of the 200 plus files, he had to have acquired things to put around his feet, knowing that he didn't want his footprints in the blood. Right? There's no way that blood gets inside his pants, but isn't all over his shirt as he's cutting his wife, and her head is spurting blood from the cuts. I don't believe, like Henry Lee does, that she's spitting up blood. I consider the spitting up blood an argument from an expert to explain the excessive blood at the murder scene. If her fall was that violent, where are the bruises all over her body? Does it also make sense to you that she would have 7 lacerations, severe lacerations, in the back of her head from a fall, but yet her skull not be fractured? How does that happen? Her head bounces into something severe enough to split her skin 7 times, but yet there's no skull fracture. I believe there's no skull fracture because Peterson is holding her head while he's carving up the back of it with a sharp object with his other hand before posing the body at the bottom of the stairs. In sum, consider the blood to have been made after the murder. That's how I see it. To distract police. Let me hear from you. I hope you leave your comments in the comment section of this video. Thanks for stopping by.